Some storms don't come to test you, they come to expose who's been throwing dirt while pretending to clap. Chosen ones, buckle up because what happened to you wasn't just wrong. It was a masterclass in human ugliness. And the world is finally waking up to it. There's something deeply unsettling about watching an innocent person get attacked, not because they did anything, but because their existence alone made insecure people itch. It's almost funny, almost how the ones who scream, "I'm real," the loudest are always the first to act like cartoon villains when no one's looking. Here's a fact that might shock you. Studies in social psychology show that people with unresolved shame are 7 times more likely to project their guilt onto someone who's done nothing to them. 7 times more. And if that doesn't explain the circus you survived, nothing will. What they did to you wasn't just disgusting. It was calculated, rehearsed, and rooted in a darkness they've been nurturing for years. You weren't the trigger. You were simply the mirror that reflected a truth they've been running from. Like that one friend who swears they're healed, but suddenly turns into a WWE wrestler the moment someone says accountability. Yet somehow, despite everything they threw at you, lies, manipulation, character assassination attempts, you remained the calm center of the chaos they created. And that's exactly why people are furious on your behalf. Because when an innocent person gets attacked, the universe takes notes, but so do the witnesses. This isn't a story about weakness. It's a story about exposure. And trust me, their exposure is only beginning. Let's get into it. Number 1, they didn't attack you. They exposed the fragility of their own identity. When people targeted you, it looked like an attack, but in reality, it was a confession. They weren't striking because you did something wrong. They were striking because something about you made them confront themselves. And that's the part they couldn't handle. People who are secure in who they are don't go around tearing others down. They don't need to. Their identity stands on its own. But those who are shaky inside, those who are barely holding themselves together, will look for someone to push down just to feel a little taller. You became that target not because you were weak, but because you represented something they weren't ready to face. Honesty, purity, authenticity, stability. Everything they pretended to have, you naturally embodied. Your presence highlighted their insecurities, their contradictions, and the parts of themselves they've been running from for years. And instead of healing, they projected. Instead of looking inward, they lashed outward. That's their pattern, not your fault. The truth is, fragile people don't break quietly. They break others first. They attack whatever threatens the fake version of themselves they've built. You didn't expose them intentionally. You simply existed in a way that made their lies wobble. They sensed that others could see the difference between you and them, and that terrified them. So they tried to distort your image before people looked too closely at theirs. But here's the twist. Their attack became their reveal. The more they tried to hurt you, the more people noticed how unstable and reactive they truly were. Their desperation became obvious. Their behavior stopped looking like confidence and started looking like insecurity in disguise. And without even trying, you ended up shining brighter, simply because their own actions drew attention to the contrast between their chaos and your consistency. The attack wasn't a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of their lack of it. They exposed themselves, loudly, recklessly, and completely, while trying to take you down, and now everyone can see it. Number 2, their cruelty wasn't personal. It was rehearsed behavior looking for its next victim. The truth is, the way they treated you had nothing to do with you at all. You weren't singled out because you deserved it. You were simply the next stop on a pattern they've repeated with many people before you. Their cruelty is like a script they've memorized, a survival method they use to avoid dealing with their own emotional mess. They didn't suddenly become this way when you entered the picture. They've been carrying this bitterness and aggression long before you ever crossed their path. People like this don't react to individuals. They react to triggers inside themselves. They move through life with unresolved pain, jealousy, insecurity, and anger, and they're constantly looking for someone who feels safe enough to dump it all on. Safe doesn't mean weak. It means someone who doesn't operate on their level, someone who won't fight dirty back, someone who won't lose their humanity just to prove a point. And that's why you became their target. Their pattern always begins the same way. They identify someone with light, kindness, or integrity, qualities they lack. And instead of being inspired, they feel threatened. They've spent so long pretending to be better than they truly are that the presence of someone genuine feels like exposure. So they react with hostility, manipulation, lies, or cruelty, hoping to break you before their own cracks start showing. But the most ironic part is this. They thought they were choosing a victim, when really they were revealing their own brokenness. Everything they did, every jab, every rumor, every attack, wasn't about destroying your reputation. It was their attempt to keep their own facade alive. Their cruelty was a habit, not a reaction to anything you did. People are furious now because they finally see the pattern. It wasn't a one-time incident. It was who they are. And you weren't their first victim. You were simply the one who didn't collapse under their usual tactics. Their behavior exposed them more than it ever harmed you, because it made everyone realize just how rehearsed, predictable, and painfully transparent their cruelty has always been. Number 3, the outrage people feel now isn't sympathy, it's recognition. What people are feeling on your behalf isn't just pity or sympathy, it's something much deeper. When they see what happened to you, they recognize a truth that has been hiding in plain sight. They recognize that someone innocent, genuine, or strong was targeted not because of anything they did, but because of who they naturally are. That recognition hits harder than anger because it bypasses logic. It goes straight to the gut. People are furious not just at the attack itself, but at the revelation it brings. They suddenly see clearly who is real, who is fake, who's projecting, and who's been pretending all along. The anger you're witnessing isn't random, it's collective awareness. It's people realizing that the world isn't as simple as it seems, that some attacks aren't about mistakes or misunderstandings, but about envy, fear, and deep-seated insecurity. They see the injustice, yes, but more importantly, they see the contrast between your authenticity and the false personas of your attackers. And that contrast doesn't just trigger outrage, it demands acknowledgement. People are furious because they are suddenly aware of what they might have missed before. They recognize your value, and they recognize the emptiness in those who tried to bring you down. There's also a quiet respect buried in that fury. People can sense when someone endures what you endured and still maintains their essence, their clarity, their composure. That kind of recognition isn't spoken, but it resonates. It's why people's anger feels so intense. They're upset not only for you, but because the world has been allowed to see the truth now, unfiltered. They're recognizing both your strength and the weakness of those who attacked you. The outrage, then, isn't about the attack alone. It's about awareness finally catching up to reality. It's people saying without words that they see what happened, they see the injustice, and they see who you truly are. And that recognition is far more powerful than any sympathy. It's validation, exposure, and alignment all rolled into one, leaving everyone around you with no choice but to acknowledge the truth. Number 4, innocence intimidates the corrupted more than power ever will. Your innocence isn't weakness, and that's exactly why it scares them. People who have lost their moral compass, who have grown comfortable lying, cheating, manipulating, or hiding behind masks, see purity as a mirror they cannot handle. It reflects everything they've abandoned, everything they've broken, and everything they've pretended to be. Power can intimidate them, yes, but it's temporary and surface level. True purity, honesty, integrity, authenticity cuts deeper. It exposes the rot in ways that strength or aggression never could. When you acted with integrity, when you stayed true to yourself while others floundered in compromise, you became an unintentional spotlight on their decay. That spotlight is terrifying for someone whose world is built on pretense. You didn't have to say or do anything extraordinary. Simply existing in your natural, uncorrupted way made them anxious, resentful, and ultimately hostile. That's why they attacked. Their aggression wasn't about what you did. It was about what your innocence reminded them of, the parts of themselves they wish they could erase or deny. And yet, the irony is powerful. Your purity isn't fragile. It's magnetic, durable, and undeniable. While they scramble to cover up their shortcomings, you embody something that cannot be faked. Every lash, every insult, every attempt to bring you down only reinforces the contrast between their decay and your clarity. They attack because they can't stand the reminder of what they've lost or betrayed. They lash out to silence the truth, not the lie. Innocence doesn't just survive in the presence of corruption, it exposes it. That's why the corrupted fear it more than raw power. Power can be resisted, negotiated with, or challenged, but pure authenticity shines in a way that cannot be bargained or ignored. And that is why you, in your integrity, are untouchable, even when they try to destroy you. Number 5, they tried to bury you because they sensed what you were becoming before you did. The truth is, they saw your potential long before you recognized it yourself. People like this have a strange kind of radar. They can sense growth, confidence, awakening, and elevation even when it's still in its early stages. They pick up on small signs you don't even notice. The way you carry yourself, the way you think, the way you bounce back from setbacks, the way you quietly improve without announcing anything. These details may feel ordinary to you, but to people living in fear or insecurity, they feel like warnings. That's why they targeted you. Not because you were weak, but because you were becoming strong. Not because you were lost, but because you were starting to find yourself. They felt the shift in you, the clarity forming, the boundaries strengthening, the inner confidence rising, and it threatened the version of you they were comfortable with. People who rely on control, manipulation, or superiority don't panic when someone is stagnant. They panic when someone is evolving. Sabotage is never directed at people going nowhere. It's always targeted at the ones who are moving upward, even if that movement is quiet. You weren't bragging, competing, or showing off. You were growing at your own pace, minding your own life, becoming better in ways that didn't need applause. That's exactly why they reacted so strongly. Quiet growth is the most threatening kind, because it can't be predicted, contained, or stopped. They tried to bury you because they hoped to interrupt that growth before it became undeniable. In their minds, if they could make you doubt yourself early enough, you might never discover the full strength of who you are. They wanted to cut the roots before the tree grew tall. But attacking someone who is becoming stronger only accelerates the process. You learn resilience, you learn clarity, you learn who deserves space in your life and who doesn't. Their sabotage wasn't a sign of your weakness, it was proof of your rising value. You scared them not because of who you were, but because of who you were on your way to becoming. And now, you're stepping into the very identity they hoped you'd never discover. Number 6, the outrage isn't about what happened, it's about what it revealed. When people see the injustice you endured, they're not just reacting to the act itself, they're reacting to the truth it uncovered. What happened to you wasn't a private event that could be swept under the rug. It was a revelation. It exposed the real character of those who attacked you, stripping away any pretense of decency, honesty, or integrity they had carefully maintained. Suddenly, everyone could see who they really were, not who they claimed to be. Your mistreatment became a spotlight, shining on the darkness they'd been hiding behind. It revealed patterns of manipulation, cruelty, and selfishness that had likely gone unnoticed until now. People realized that the danger wasn't from you or anyone like you. It had been sitting quietly within them all along. The outrage people feel is fueled not just by empathy for your suffering, but by the shock of recognizing who the true villains are. The anger is as much about the exposure of their character as it is about the harm done to you. And here's the striking part. The more they tried to harm you, the more they exposed themselves. Every lie, every insult, every attempt to undermine you served as evidence of their moral bankruptcy. They weren't hiding anything. They were revealing it. People could see the desperation, the envy, and the insecurity driving them. And that fueled the collective outrage. The world doesn't just care about who was hurt. It cares about the truth coming to light. In a way, your mistreatment became an unintentional act of justice. It pulled the mask off the real villains and forced everyone to confront their true nature. The outrage isn't simply about the attack. It's about recognition, clarity, and accountability. It's about seeing who really belongs in the shadows and who belongs in the light. And in exposing them, you became more than a victim. You became the mirror everyone needed to see clearly. Number 7, your attackers weren't bold. They were opportunistic scavengers. What they did might have seemed daring, but it wasn't bravery. It was desperation disguised as action. They didn't confront you when you were at your strongest or most aware. They waited for the moment when you were unguarded, when your focus was elsewhere, when your attention was divided. They hunted for weakness, not to challenge you, but to exploit the smallest opening they could find. True courage would have meant facing you as you are, in your full clarity and strength. But they lacked that. Their power was never real. It was borrowed from timing, circumstance, and the fear they hoped to instill. Opportunists like this thrive on imbalance. They seek moments where they can dominate without risk, where the fight is uneven and the consequence is minimal for them. That's why their attacks often feel calculated, sneaky, and almost cowardly in retrospect. They strike quickly, hoping no one notices the cracks in their own armor. But the reality is that their strength is fragile. It exists only in the shadow of someone else's momentary vulnerability. Without that, they crumble. The irony is that these attempts always backfire. Targeting someone at their lowest or unprepared moment doesn't diminish the person being attacked. It highlights the predator's limitations. It exposes their fear of true confrontation and their inability to match someone whose clarity and composure are intact. Their tactics speak volumes about their insecurity, not your weakness. You were never overpowered. You were strategically underestimated. They weren't testing you, they were testing themselves, using you as a shield for their own inadequacy. And the moment you step fully into your awareness, the moment you regain your power, their opportunism is meaningless. What seemed like a threat becomes proof of their fragility, and your strength only grows brighter in contrast. They didn't strike boldly, they scavenged. But you remain untouchable because your power was never dependent on their recognition or restraint. Number 8, they underestimated you because they confused gentleness with incapacity. People who attacked or mocked you didn't truly understand what they were facing. They saw your calm, your kindness, your patience, and they assumed it meant you were weak, pliable, or easy to manipulate. They mistook composure for cowardice, humility for submission, and gentleness for incompetence. That miscalculation is their tragic flaw, and it's exactly why they failed to see the threat you quietly posed. Gentleness is often misunderstood. In a world that glorifies aggression, loudness, and immediate dominance, soft strength is invisible until it becomes undeniable. While they were busy assuming you would crumble under pressure, you were quietly observing, learning, and growing. Every insult, every attempt to provoke you, every push against your boundaries only sharpened your clarity and your understanding of human behavior. The softness they ridiculed is actually a reservoir of power. They mocked patience and empathy without realizing that these qualities are the foundation for lasting influence and resilience. The irony is exquisite. Their attacks, meant to diminish you, only highlighted your inner strength. Gentleness doesn't provoke reckless reactions. It encourages discernment, strategic thinking, and emotional intelligence. Over time, it transforms into wisdom. Unlike anger, aggression, or bitterness, this kind of strength doesn't burn bridges. It builds pathways. While they remain trapped in cycles of envy, resentment, and short-term victories, your gentleness matures into an unshakable force that naturally elevates you above them. They will always remember you as someone who didn't retaliate immediately, who didn't stoop to their level, who stayed soft while they raged. And in that memory lies your triumph. They underestimated you because they saw softness as incapacity. But what they failed to see is that your quiet strength ages into power far more enduring and formidable than anything their aggression could achieve. Their mockery is your foreshadowing. Their doubt is the evidence that you are already on a higher plane, moving forward while they remain stuck in their own misconceptions. Number 9. Their reaction wasn't hatred, it was panic. The way they came at you, the hostility, the accusations, the sudden shift in behavior, was never about genuine hate. Hate has a pattern, a logic, a slow burn. What they showed you was panic, the kind that comes from realizing they can't control the narrative anymore. You represented something they didn't know how to handle, a person who couldn't be manipulated, bought, silenced, or shaped into their convenience. And for people who thrive on influence, that is the ultimate threat. Your strength wasn't loud, but it was solid. You didn't budge the way others did. You didn't fall for their tactics or beg for their approval. You moved with a sense of inner certainty they couldn't predict or influence. And when people who rely on manipulation meet someone they can't steer, they panic, because suddenly they're forced to face themselves without the usual escape routes. To them, your authenticity was a wall they couldn't climb. They couldn't charm their way through you. They couldn't guilt trip you. They couldn't twist your emotions. They couldn't confuse you. Every trick that worked on others failed with you, and that's what triggered their fear. You were a reminder that not everyone is for sale, not everyone is blinded by status, not everyone bows to pressure. That resistant spirit of yours made them feel powerless in a way they weren't prepared for. Their attacks were an attempt to regain control. When manipulation fails, insecure people resort to chaos. They create drama, spread rumors, twist situations, anything to destabilize the person who refuses to be controlled. They needed you to shrink so they could breathe again. They needed you to doubt yourself so they could feel superior. But instead of breaking, you exposed just how fragile their sense of power truly was. Their reaction was never hatred. Hatred is too stable, too intentional. What you witnessed was fear, pure, unfiltered fear, disguised as aggression. Because nothing terrifies a manipulator more than someone who sees clearly, stands firmly, and refuses to be moved. Number 10. The universe didn't defend you instantly because the exposure was necessary. It's easy to feel abandoned when injustice strikes, but the delay in protection isn't neglect, it's strategy. Sometimes the universe allows the storm to hit fully because the exposure it creates is far more powerful than immediate defense. your suffering, your mistreatment, and the chaos around you weren't random. They were a stage set for the truth to be undeniable. When attacks happen in secrecy, they can be dismissed, hidden, or ignored. But when they unfold openly, when the wound is visible and the manipulation transparent, the world can't turn away. The timing of justice isn't about speed, it's about impact. The universe doesn't rush because it doesn't need to. It waits until the lesson is fully written, until the contrast between innocence and corruption, truth and deception, becomes undeniable. Sometimes the wound must bleed in full view so that healing doesn't just return you to where you were, it elevates you beyond it. That kind of legendary healing, the kind that inspires awe and shifts perspectives, can't happen in silence. Your struggle became proof, documentation, and revelation all at once. The delay in defense allowed your attackers to reveal their true nature, and it allowed witnesses to see the full scope of the injustice. By the time intervention came, the world understood exactly who was right and who was wrong. The harm they caused became a mirror, reflecting both their corruption and your resilience. In this sense, the universe isn't passive, it's strategic. Every moment where you felt unprotected, every instance of betrayal, was part of a greater design to make the eventual vindication undeniable. The exposure wasn't cruel, it was necessary. It set the stage for a victory that couldn't be ignored, a healing that couldn't be trivialized, and a story of triumph that will echo far longer than the attacks themselves. Sometimes justice waits, not because it isn't coming, but because when it arrives, it has to arrive fully, unmistakably, and in a way that leaves everyone aware of who truly stood tall. Number 11. They attacked what they couldn't replicate. People don't usually go after what they already understand or possess. They go after what highlights their own shortcomings, what exposes the gap between who they pretend to be and who they truly are. You represented something they couldn't mimic, authentic innocence, sincerity, a kind of moral clarity they lost a long time ago. And when people can't replicate something valuable, they often try to destroy it, not because it's dangerous, but because it makes their excuses impossible to hide behind. Your innocence didn't just bother them, it cornered them. It forced them to see that purity still exists, that goodness hasn't died out, and that some people can move through life without the bitterness, manipulation, or deception they rely on. That alone made you a threat, not because you were trying to expose them, but because your existence did it naturally. You didn't need to call them out. Your character did it for you. People who live with hidden guilt or unresolved darkness don't like reminders that there's another way to live. They don't want to face the fact that their behavior is a choice, not a destiny. And you were living proof of that. Your purity invalidated their excuses. Your kindness challenged their cynicism. Your honesty made their lies impossible to justify. It's uncomfortable to be confronted with a standard you can't meet, especially when you've convinced yourself that your flaws are simply how life works. That's why they lashed out. Not because you harmed them, but because you made it clear, without even trying, that the world isn't as dark or complicated as they claim. Your presence stripped away their justification to be cruel, manipulative, or selfish, and instead of rising to your level, they tried to drag you down to theirs, hoping to level the playing field through sabotage. But destruction doesn't erase truth. Their attacks only highlighted the very purity they envied. They failed to replicate it, and failing to replicate it meant they had to face themselves. Instead of doing that, they chose the easier route, trying to break what made them uncomfortable. They didn't attack weakness, they attacked proof that their excuses were lies, and that is exactly why you stood out, and why you still rise above them. Number 12, their smear campaign failed because it relied on people ignoring what their intuition already knew. They thought they could manipulate perception, twist narratives, and rewrite reality to make you look flawed. They assumed people would accept their lies at face value, that charm, confidence, or noise could mask their true intentions. But what they didn't account for is something far stronger than gossip or deception: human intuition. People can feel energy, notice inconsistencies, and sense dishonesty long before facts are presented. No amount of manipulation could override that innate radar. Their attacks were designed to isolate you, to make the world doubt your integrity, and to create a narrative where you looked vulnerable or guilty. They invested time, strategy, and emotion into a plan they believed was foolproof. But intuition is stubborn. It doesn't listen to evidence alone. Even before the truth came out, those around you could sense something was off. There was a mismatch between what was being said about you and the reality people instinctively felt. That silent awareness acted like a shield, protecting you from the full impact of their lies. The collective outrage that followed wasn't born from the story they told. It came from a deeper recognition. People realized that the attack itself was unjust, and that their instincts about your character had been correct all along. Their plan relied on deception, but they underestimated the human ability to read situations, to detect the difference between authentic integrity and fabricated falsehood. Every attempt to manipulate perception only highlighted their desperation, making the smear campaign appear weaker and more transparent. In the end, their failure wasn't because you defended yourself. It was because truth has a way of asserting itself through subtle awareness. People's intuition saw past the noise, exposing the lies before the facts even had to surface. What they tried to hide became their undoing, and what they hoped to weaponize against you only reinforced the reality everyone could feel: that you were genuine, unjustly targeted, and untouchable in the eyes of those who could see clearly. Number 13. You didn't lose anything. They lost their last chance at redemption. When everything happened, it may have felt like you were the one losing. Your peace, your trust, your energy, your stability. But with time and clarity, it becomes obvious. You didn't lose anything of true value. What you lost was weight that was never meant to stay with you. The real loss happened on their side, because there are certain lines a person crosses that they can never spiritually return from. Hurting someone who is innocent, someone who meant no harm, someone who was simply existing in their truth. This is one of those lines. There's a spiritual principle that people often ignore. When you harm a pure soul, you don't just damage them, you damage yourself. You break something inside you that doesn't repair easily. Hurting an innocent person isn't just a mistake, it's a moral rupture. It reveals who you truly are, and once that truth surfaces, there's no going back. They didn't just misjudge you, they misjudged their own character, and that misjudgment cost them the one thing people desperately need, but rarely admit: the possibility of redemption. Your attackers crossed a boundary that exposed their spiritual bankruptcy. It showed that their cruelty wasn't reaction, it was character. There's no justification for the level of harm they aimed at you, and deep down, they know it. That knowledge will follow them long after the situation ends. They'll replay it, justify it, deny it, try to bury it, but it will linger. Because when someone attacks innocence, it hits their conscience in a way that can't be undone. Meanwhile, you haven't lost anything essential. You've gained clarity, wisdom, discernment, and a deeper understanding of your own strength. You walked away with your spirit intact. They lost something far greater: their last chance to choose a better version of themselves. Their behavior exposed them, and now they're left with the consequences, not you. The universe has a way of balancing things. You rise. They carry the weight of what they did. And that weight doesn't dissolve because hurting an innocent person marks you in a way that time cannot erase. Number 14, their attack became your evidence, not your downfall. What they did to you was meant to break you, silence you, or make you disappear. They wanted you to crumble under the pressure so they could point at the pieces and say, "See, we were right." But instead of destroying you, their actions ended up documenting everything people needed to see. Their attack became a record, clear, undeniable proof of their intentions, their character, and their corruption. Every move they made only highlighted the truth they tried so desperately to hide. You were never the one exposed in this situation. They were. Your behavior stayed consistent, calm, sincere, and grounded. Theirs grew erratic, aggressive, and desperate. People noticed. People always notice, even when they don't say anything at first. The contrast between your stability and their chaos spoke louder than any defense you could have offered. You didn't need to argue your innocence. Their actions testified on your behalf. What they meant for damage became a spotlight, shining on the real dynamics at play. You weren't falling apart. You were being revealed as the one who stood rooted in truth. They weren't rising. They were implicating themselves with every lie, every smear, every attack. The more they pushed, the more obvious it became who was genuine and who was corrupt. And the beauty of truth is that it only needs time, not permission, to prove itself. Now everyone sees clearly, not because you fought back loudly, but because the evidence created itself through their behavior. You stood in your authenticity while they exposed their own darkness. That's why you're still standing, and that's why their narrative collapsed. Your dignity, your composure, and your innocence became the final documentation that sealed the truth. Their attack didn't break you. It built the case that vindicated you. They wrote the story, but it ended with your victory, not your downfall. Conclusion. What happened to you wasn't just an attack. It was a revelation. Every lie, every smear, every attempt to break you became a mirror, reflecting the true nature of those who targeted you. They exposed their fragility, their fear, and their moral bankruptcy, while you revealed strength, authenticity, and resilience. Your innocence didn't make you weak. It made you untouchable. Your gentleness didn't make you vulnerable. It turned into wisdom that far outlasts their bitterness. Every act meant to destroy you became evidence of your clarity and their corruption. Every attack a testament to your rising power and undeniable presence. You didn't lose anything. What they hoped would break you only elevated you. Their panic, desperation, and opportunism revealed who they truly are, while your composure, integrity, and quiet strength proved who belongs in the light. The world isn't just watching, they're recognizing. They see who is genuine, who is corrupt, and who stands firmly on the side of truth. Your story isn't just survival, it's triumph, proof that rising above injustice doesn't just restore balance, it transforms perception, influence, and legacy. This is more than a lesson about resilience, it's a statement about destiny. Those who tried to bury you ended up showcasing your strength, and those who attacked revealed their own limits. The universe allowed the exposure because it knew that the clarity, justice, and recognition that followed would be unstoppable. You were never defeated. You were documented, elevated, and validated. And now everyone sees the truth. If this resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more powerful insights. Like if you felt the energy, comment to share your thoughts, and share this video so others can witness the truth as clearly as you have. This is your story, and it's only just beginning. Stay blessed always.